welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everybody. I'm TWB. This week we suffered a great loss. Legendary musician and social activist Richie Havens. Let's take a look.
Legendary folk and rock musician Richie Havens, who opened the historic 1969 Woodstock Music Festival and energized the crowd with his version of Freedom, died of a heart attack this week at the age of 72. Havens, who emerged from the New York folk scene in the 1960s and went on to sing for the Dalai Lama and President Bill Clinton, was known for his compassionate nature, his light humor, and powerful stage presence. Famous for his soulful covers of songs by the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and The Who, Havens used his music to champion causes of personal freedom and brotherhood.
If someone would have asked me that if I thought we would have a woman and an African American running for office, I would have told him not for a long time, but that's the legacy of the 60s.
For many, Richie Havens was the voice of a generation. But as loved ones and fans mourn his passing and honor his memory, some are also wondering about the future. For decades, folk, rock, punk, rap, and even pop artists stepped forward with socially conscious lyrics, as well as vocal activism, outside the recording studio. That's a far cry, some argue, from the crass materialism often featured in hit music videos and songs today. Was Richie Havens the last champion of a bygone era? Or is music in America still a force for positive social change?
Because who knows what's going to happen, you know? I'm so open to whatever happens.
All right, to get to, we do have a new panelist. Jack, introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Hi, I'm Jack Stamps. I teach music technology at Seton Hall University. I'm also a songwriter and producer under the name, the alternative doppelganger name, MC Debris. So,
what would you prefer us to call you?
Jack.
Great. JW, middle initial W as well, so welcome.
Thank you.
So in your opinion, given your background, what made Richie Havens so great and irreplaceable, really?
The first thing that comes to mind is the way he played the guitar. Physically, it was a very unconventional way to have the guitar tuned in such a way that he could just fret the entire chord with just his thumb.
No kidding.
Right, and that was, I think, in terms of just that one thing that you sort of iconically remember about him, it's that. And it occurred to me while I was watching him in the prologue before this, that also allowed for the simplicity of his message, or the simplicity of the actual guitar playing to not get in the way of his message, which is what we're here to talk about.
And let's talk about his message, Yohurur.
He's a wonderful example of the spirit of the 1960s, and we're looking at that baby boom generation. And they are getting up in age, actually, and we're going to start to see some of these icons from that period pass. You think about somebody like a Nina Simone, for example, who was so much identified with that period. Richie Havens is as much a part of that. And his Woodstock moment, I think in many ways captures the spirit of what was going on that weekend. He improvised the song Freedom, but it spoke to, it was almost in the ether at that moment. And so when we look at him in his lifelong championing of causes like civil rights and the environment, it speaks to the importance of that historical moment, but our continuing engagement with that space in American history.
Do you think we'll remember him more for the music or the man? Or 50-50? What do you think, Jack?
Well, I really think it's a combination of the two. I think it's impossible to separate the music from the man, the guitar from the man, the message from the man. And his output lasted for decades. In fact, he continued on until about 3 years ago, I believe. He stopped touring 3 years ago, so he was an exceptionally busy guy.
Right. And when you think of, like, you know, iconic musicians, Stevie Wonder, James Brown, Bob Dylan, they're known for their socially conscious lyrics and their sort of, you know, an off-the-stage activism. I'm curious what some of your favorites are in terms of some of these men and their voice.
Stevie Wonder, for me, without question. You look at that catalog of music from Living for the City to Pastime Paradise, to his work in trying to get the King holiday pushed through in the early 80s. Just a phenomenal musician, but somebody who also kept the message very clear in his music and also remains very socially engaged, both in what he records and what he represents off stage.
Right, yeah. And what do you think, Jack? What are some of your favorites,
Well, I
highlights?
certainly agree with Stevie Wonder. There's also a distinction I'd like to make between those who are claiming activism as part of what they're doing, and somebody, for example, like Frank Zappa, who I have a great deal of respect for, his music. He was not an activist per se, but he was a social satirist and really brought a lot of social issues, oftentimes in a body and humorous way, to the forefront. And really got us thinking about things, not only in music, but in politics. For instance, he'd have people registered to vote at concerts, that sort of thing. So, and I also think of U2 in the 80s.
Right.
I think of REM in the 80s as being, at least early in their career, as being...
They broke up though, right? Is
They
REM
did,
no longer?
yeah,
It's a shame.
2 years ago.
Yeah. Speaking of progressive artists, though, we do have another one joining us momentarily who also has his very own music video coming out. Let's take a quick look.
That's why you inspire when you hear it. Give like my mother, stubborn like my father. Their connection brought about a man like no other. With my grandmother's intelligence, killing instinct that my grandfather make nonsense irrelevant. I got a pinch of W.E.B. Malcolm X, Nat Turner runs all through me. Muslim version of Dr. King, consciousness of Marvin Gaye, but hey, I can't sing.
All right, let's meet the man behind the music. That's Basheer Jones, a humanitarian and a hip-hop poet, obviously, as we just saw. Basheer, are you there?
I am. How you doing?
Congratulations on the video. Quite a powerful message. The imagery alone, tell us about it.
Thank you so much. Well, the concept, by any means, as you know, is from Malcolm X, who focused on making change by any means. So I think nowadays, the young people and adults alike, we're striving to do something by any means, whether we want to make money by any means, or we want to get that woman or get that man by any means. So the movement is, let's bring about change, or be the change we want to see by any means necessary.
Do you think there's not enough people doing the type of thing that you're trying to accomplish?
I ask myself that question: Is the nonsense that loud, or are we that silent? That's something that I battle myself with, but I'm just striving to do the best that I can do.
I'm curious your thoughts. Lauryn Hill's been absent for quite a long time, been on quite a long hiatus. She recently announced a comeback. She says the reason for a 10-year absence, and I quote, a controlling parasitic industry. Do you guys agree with that? Let's open it up to the panel. Jack.
Well, why would she come back?
Yeah,
I mean, parasitic industry. I mean, I totally agree with her 100%, and that's a
maybe
good
she needs to pay the bills. That's why she's coming back.
It's a good reason to get out, but it's a good reason to stay in as well and fight the cause.
Right.
Fight the cause of the industry, the rampant commercialism that is at the heart of her argument. But certainly, I welcome her back. I love her music.
Yeah, but is commercialism to blame for the lack of creativity that we see today in some people's opinions, Yohurur?
I think so, and I like what Basheer said in this sense. When Lauryn Hill came out, that record came out, she was really reflective of that historical moment. I think when you talk about social consciousness in music, there can be that which is retrospective, that looks back and says, we've got to resurrect some of these people from the past and their messages. But what Lauryn Hill did with the miseducation of Lauryn Hill is to say, there's some real problems here in 1990s America that I want to reflect in my music, and I think that's why we all responded to that record so positively.
No, we certainly did. Basheer, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think commercialism is to blame for sort of a lack of creativity and in terms of Lauryn's perspective?
I think it's a lack of courage. The industry is going to do what it's going to do. They're a business, so they're going to try to sell as much records as they can. But you have so many people who are only focused on getting a contract or only focused on making money, and they're just following a trend. So I'm excited about Lauryn Hill coming back. I think that it shows us that, we're trying to make a change outside of the system, when sometimes you can make it within the system as well.
Jack, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think another facet here to consider is technology itself, and the way music is disseminated, the way music is put together. Virtually anybody with a laptop is a self-promoter and self-producer.
Auto-tune, is that the yeah, that's sort of changed the
Don't get me started there. I can tell you that in my personal opinion, auto-tune, if used creatively, can be quite interesting, but in many ways it takes away the very essence, the very beginnings of the notes, you know, and that's a conversation for another show for sure. But if you ran Richie Havens through auto-tune, you would not have Richie Havens. You just wouldn't. You'd have...
It's a bit of an oxymoron, Richie Havens through auto-tune.
You'd have the producer.
Doesn't work.
You'd have the producer. So it's this, this interesting dichotomy between artist and producer, and the line that is certainly blurred between the two.
Well, when you look at a guy like Richie Havens, sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, are we expecting too much from our artists in terms of being conscious and socially progressive? I mean, can't they just play music? Do they have to have a message? What do you think?
I think they can. I mean, we saw that duality in the 1960s with something like Motown, where clearly we make good music and we want people to dance. If that music took on political overtones, it was simply by accident, although you had artists who were socially conscious. But there's room for both, and I think what you want is a healthy mix. You want people to be able to view music to a certain extent as a degree of escapism, but sometimes you want music to be reflective, you know, as Chuck D famously said about hip hop, the CNN of the streets, to give you a sense of how important messages are in terms of how they're communicated through music.
Basheer, what do you think? Do you think we're putting too much, or there's too much expectation from artists nowadays?
Well, you know, somebody told me yesterday, a wise man, he said that, you know, responsibility is, you know, you have an ability and you must respond to that ability. And, you know, the fact is as we travel to schools and speak with young people, music has a greater impact than we can ever imagine on their subconscious and on their actions. So, you know, my duty and what you guys are striving to do, in my opinion, is that we have to truly hold people responsible. I think they should be held responsible. They have a platform, and they will be held responsible for what they say and what they inspire people to do. You know, as Brother talked about Motown, you know, you had people like Marvin Gaye who decided to say, you know what, I enjoy this music, let's get it on, but, you know, really what's going on? And that's what we need to talk about.
Right. Well, let's talk about what's going on with negative rap lyrics. There's been a recent debate on Twitter in terms of how to respond to negative rap lyrics. One side says let's condemn them. Another one says let's reach out and embrace them and help them. Where do you stand on the issue?
Well, I think that there's a balance between both. But sometimes you have artists who are in the industry. I just did a big event here in Cleveland with the RZA from Wu-Tang. And he talked about how he would reach out to some people, and some people feel that, you know, they're God. They feel like they're on top of the world. So I think that the first step should be to reach out. But for those who don't want to listen, we shouldn't falter from exposing the wrongdoing in public.
Okay, but Jack, what do you think? Should we be condemning them publicly or reaching out, embracing them, and guiding them?
Well, I have a kind of long history of having an issue with any sort of intervention in lyrics whatsoever. Yeah,
even if there's concrete negativity in lyrics?
Well, is there concrete scientific evidence that
well, evil's evil.
And evil is something that can be weighed in terms of the individual.
No, I don't agree. Okay.
Well, that's fine. But
no, it's a good thing I don't agree, because it'd be boring if I did.
We wouldn't be here if we all agreed, right? That's why we're here, right? But I don't believe that there is any rational evidence that a string of words, when uttered, is going to cause a particular liability in society.
But there's something called hate lyrics. There are lyrics out there that promote hatred. I don't think you can argue with that. So you think we should just let it live? But we should just let it be? I mean, that's free speech?
I don't argue that that it exists.
Right.
But you know, people have the option to choose to listen or not listen. And if it gets back to this great question of parenting and responsibility, understanding the general functional difference between right and wrong, and expression. I mean, what I love about rap and how it relates to this particular discussion of activism is that it is a reaction to what's going on. Frankly, I'm surprised that there aren't enough rappers out there rapping about what's going on in Wall Street or what has happened. I guess maybe the bursting of the financial bubble isn't
well, maybe someone's writing lyrics as we speak.
A romantic topic, you know, to discuss. But certainly there's plenty to go on and on about.
Sure.
And rap is great
Right.
for that.
Yohurur, what do you think? What's your final thought on just sort of negative lyrics and letting them live or condemning them?
Well, I agree in the sense that you need to have parents take the responsibility of looking at what kids have access to. At the same time, you want that tension in a democracy. You want people to have access to information, whether it comes on a Beastie Boys record or a Public Enemy record, or whether it happens by virtue of someone listening to a speech on YouTube or reading a book. As long as that dialogue's taking place, that's healthy for our democracy.
Okay. All right. I know you say it's about parenting, but parenting is very different today with the level of access kids have with the internet and smartphones and what they're exposed to. So that's another conversation. Basheer, final thought.
Well, I think, Jack said some great things, but the last thing he said I disagree with. A string of words has power. And you'll be surprised, when I travel to the jails, how many of those young people were inspired to do wrong things by the rappers that they were listening to.
Yep, that's a good point.
So words have great power. Don't ever deny that. And, we're not rapping about Wall Street because we're dealing with the issues on Main Street.
Right.
But,
Okay.
Yeah, but there is trickle down. There is a relationship between what happens on Wall Street and what happens on Main Street, and I think
we're starving.
All right,
something
guys.
That's all we can talk about right now.
I hate to cut the conversation, but I have to.
That's fine.
Because we're out of time, but thanks you guys for your insight. I wish we had more time to
Thanks for
discuss.
having me.
We got to move on and take a break. Coming up on Fresh Outlook, we remember another legend and a hero, Jackie Robinson. Stay with us. That's next.